Okay, let's get started. I'm assuming everybody will jump in as we move along. But good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Let's Imagine webinar. I'm Ken Serini, and I'm so excited you can all join us today. This is always one of my favorite sessions of the year because it gives us a chance to shine a spotlight on the incredible nonprofit leaders right here on Long Island. Today, you'll hear inspiring stories, innovative strategies, and the true heart of community impact from the winners of the 13th annual Long Island Imagine Awards. We're thrilled to have such a dynamic panel with us this morning, leaders who are making a difference every single day. So let's dive in and meet some of our change makers. We're going to go through and give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Carolyn, can you start? Maybe just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your organization, and describe what your organization does.
Sure, thank you. And good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Milana. I am the physician in chief of Stony Brook Children's Hospital. As a children's hospital, we are part of a larger academic medical center, and our mission really, as it states, is to transform the lives through scientific discovery, education, and healthcare. What that really means for us is providing exceptional care for the children of Suffolk County, close to home, so that they don't feel like they have to drive across Long Island or into Manhattan to get that really good care. We also strive to provide groundbreaking research and train the next generation of doctors that will change the lives of children across the country and hopefully the world.
Awesome. Jennifer?
Good morning, Jen Varenka from ArtBeat LI, and we were Dancing Classrooms Long Island. Our mission is to foster connection and community to folks of all ages across Long Island through dance, music, and culture. And we do that with programs in the schools, in senior centers, in community organizations, and again, just really trying to foster connection.
Awesome. Heather?
Hi, good morning. I'm Heather Arnet. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Heckscher Museum of Art, where we create opportunities for everyone to experience art that broadens our understanding of the past and fosters community connections to the present and creates diverse possibilities for the future. So we'll talk more about what that all means, but certainly being an art museum in the center of Huntington Village and our community here on Long Island.
Great. David?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Kilmnick. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the president and founder of the LGBT network. When we first started, it was called Legally, Long Island Gay and Lesbian Youth. So for those of you that have been around for decades, you probably will have known us as Legally. The organization has grown in the 32 years into a full service and advocacy and education organization working on behalf of Long Island and Queens, or New York City's LGBTQ communities, through the provision of a lot of different types of services, anti-bullying work, education, health prevention and testing, and advocacy is really at the core, has been when I started the organization, still is. It's needed more than ever today. And our goal is not just merely to help people survive, but to thrive. And we need to create a lot of change in the communities that we live in, local, regional, and statewide and national. And that's our goal, and we're not going to stop till that happens.
That's awesome. Linda?
Hi, good morning. My name is Linda Beigel Schulman. My son, Scott J. Beigel, was the teacher and cross-country coach who was murdered in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School massacre in Parkland, Florida. Scott sacrificed his life to save the lives of 31 of his students. I decided right then that I was going to accomplish two things. I was going to open a fund in Scott's honor, and I was going to fight for common sense gun safety. The Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund was founded in 2018, 2 days after the mass shooting. The Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund is a 501c3 organization, and our mission and purpose are to send at-risk, underserved children touched by gun violence to summer sleepaway camp. We send our campers to 7 different camps, 4 in New York, 1 in Massachusetts, 1 in New Jersey, and 1 in Florida. Camp affords the children to experience 2 weeks of activities such as nature, arts and crafts, swim lessons, boating, horseback riding, basketball, softball, archery, dancing, theater arts, computer workshops, just to name a few. And for many of the campers, these activities are theirs for the very first time. The campers make new lifelong friends as they learn to work together, have meals together, and share their stories, all while learning to trust, respect, and most important, just be kids. We call it prehabilitation. so we can keep them from ever having to experience rehabilitation. Our program, very important, is not a one-off. We send the campers from age 8 and then continue to send the same campers and try adding campers year after year until they reach the age of 16. At 16, they become counselors in training, CITs. At 17, they become junior counselors, and they pay it forward.
Awesome. And Joanna?
Hi, thanks. I'm Joanna Formot. I'm the Executive Director at SibsPlace. We are an affiliate program of Mount Sinai South Nassau, and our focus is providing prevention-based expressive arts therapy to children ages 5 to 17 who either have a parent or sibling with a devastating illness like cancer, or children who have also experienced the loss of a parent or sibling. So we're providing this care and community, much like I hear everybody is doing on this panel, to children at a time of crisis. So hopefully that they can gain the self-expression and the coping skills that they need when they're young, that they'll take into a lifetime and not necessarily need to take on more mental health treatment and care in their future.
That's awesome. So now you've had a chance to meet the panel. I just want to kind of make sure that everybody knows that if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. Let's try to make this as interactive as we can, given the Zoom limitations that we have. But please, feel free to chime in, throw questions, throw comments into the chat so that we can kind of make this interactive. So I'm going to start off by throwing out a question. What factors are critical to your organization's success as we move through 2025? Lynn, do you want to start off with that?
Sure. Critical factors for us. I think that we probably have the success for the Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund in 2025 were program impact, volunteerism, and measurement. As far as program impact, what I mean is our reputation and credibility depend on delivering a program that meets the needs of children impacted by gun violence. We have a solid program. We call it camperships. We provide and we have testimonials from our campers and their families about the impact that has on them going to summer sleepaway camp. And the impact is on the campers' lives as well as their families. As far as volunteerism, this year we've worked hard to maintain our volunteer base, our board members, and partner organizations. It's been really a struggle this year. I don't know exactly why, but a real struggle this year as opposed to years before. I guess the volunteerism amplifies the fund's reach and credibilities. We have wonderful volunteers that help the Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund, and they really help us a lot with going out and getting in-kind drives for our campers. We're proud of the high school students that have become part of volunteering with our organization this past year. We communicate with them day in and day out, and we keep them motivated and engaged. They've really stepped up our high school students. And as far as measurement, we've also worked diligently on impact measurement. We use surveys. We evaluate the programs for effectiveness, and then we share the outcomes with our funders and our donors to reinforce the credibility of the camperships. It's really important. They want to know statistics. They want the measurements. So we've really learned how to get it out to them.
Well, that opens up a bunch of other questions too, but let's stay on this for a second. Then I'm going to kind of go off on a tangent in a second. So Heather, do you want to chime in on this?
Oh, sure. So what are can you repeat the question just because it was.
So yeah, what are the critical factors that your organization is looking at in order to achieve a success this year? And again, I guess maybe what are you doing to ensure long-term sustainability and growth?
Sure. Well, and I think for the Heckscher, what's most important to us is that we are serving the most people we can in our community. And so increasing visitorship has been something that's really been important to us. So over the last few years, as you all know, back when the pandemic hit, all museums across the country were closed. So visitorship hit what we would call like an all-time low, right? The museums themselves were closed. One opportunity, though, that provided itself was I think museums really started to think very deeply about what their role was in their community and how they could serve their community, even beyond the art on our walls. And so there were a lot of different mutual aid and community engagement initiatives that started to happen where the museums could serve as a center for community, for gathering, for service in all sorts of ways. So when the museum opened again after the pandemic, think that really gave us a new opportunity to open again and differently. And so, one thing that we've made a commitment to is being free admission, something that I think was really at the heart of the August and Anna Heckscher when they started the museum over 100 years ago. But of course, the financial realities of a nonprofit had made it such that the museum had needed to charge admission or ask for suggested donations through the years. And we felt like it was really important to be explicitly free admission. And also, as we looked at the demographics of our community, here in Huntington, over half of our school district, our natives speak Spanish at home. And so we also thought it was really important to go completely bilingual so that any child, any family member who came to the park would see English and Spanish on the outside of our building, on the inside of our building. Every single piece of text was saying, bienvenido, like welcome, this is your museum too. And we have seen our attendance figures not just rebound from where they were at their peak before the pandemic, but we've doubled our visitorship as a result of that. And I really think that that's critical for us. It's critical to see that more people in the community are utilizing the museum or attending the museum, thinking of the museum as their space. And also, as we struggle right now in an economy that's becoming harder for nonprofits, as we see federal funding being cut for the arts and other things, I think that's something we think a lot about very deeply, which is we are committed to free admission. We're grateful to partners like Bank of America who've provided a grant to us to help support that. But, it's critical to us to be of service to the community.
Great. And David, do you want to chime in here?
Sure. So what's critical to the organization, and what was the second part of the question?
So we're looking at critical to the organization's success and maybe what's kind of helped with its long-term sustainability and growth.
Sure. And before I get into that question, just also want to thank Heather for the partnership that we have together, and how even in this climate of money being taken away for different type of exhibits from the arts in general, but different type of exhibits like the Pride one that was held during Long Island Pride, which our organization runs in Huntington. Heather and the organization still went forward with it, and it was a tremendous success. So thank you, Heather, for sticking with it. And we're in this together, and I think we're really stronger together. A wise woman said that, and the world would be very different if she was elected president. So, but in any case, I got distracted. So what's critical to our success is actually just saying what I just said. I mean, and meaning that, that if someone was elected president, our world would be different. I think we have to, for an organization like ours that serves the LGBTQ community, we need to stay focused on our mission. I mean, we also need to be strategic in realizing the environment that we're in and the climate that we're living in, and where we're doing our work in Nassau and Suffolk counties, and a way that we talk about what we do and what we need to do is very different in Nassau and Suffolk County versus Queens and New York City. So, so I think it's really about understanding our environment, but never moving from our mission, which is making sure that LGBTQ people, no matter where they live, learn, work, play, and pray, are safe, and can have the opportunity to just completely be themselves and thrive. But understanding what we need to do in these times, which are a little similar, but I would say even more extreme than when I started this organization in 1993. So, and what we're doing now to support that in looking for sustainability and long-term success is building our board slowly, smart, and in a way where folks are committed to it. I think we do have the strongest board we've ever had in the 32 years. And part of that was, and this is another question, but part of that was me stepping back from some of that, as the leader of this organization for 32 years and letting other people step in and who may have more patience and, and to be able to do that work. So we're undergoing a strategic planning process right now where the board is completely focused on what our North Star is. They are extremely supportive, and I think we're going to come out much better for this. I mean, we're also realizing the economy we live in. And what we do have now in terms of the grants that we do have, and which still a heavy majority of it is public funding. And while that may seem good when you see the dollar signs, it's troubling when how government pays us. And for example, on New York City grants, I mean, we're just finally getting paid for 2022. And we've spent all this money. So we have to take a look at what is going to be smart for us in this climate going forward. We opened up our main headquarters is in Hauppauge. We have a 15,000 square foot center there. We also have centers in outreach centers in Bridgehampton and Sag Harbor and churches. And we do have a facility in Beigel, which is our original home, which is our original hometown, and where we built affordable senior housing with a developer for the LGBTQ communities, an 8,000 square foot center there, which we own as part of that deal. And so part of what we're looking at now, even though we have this beautiful facility in Hauppauge, this 15,000 square foot facility that when we opened in 2019, pre-pandemic, we had all these grandiose plans. All nonprofits were going to be able to use it. You don't have to pay the Sheraton Hotel down the road if it's still called the Sheraton. I don't know, but and all this AV equipment, we're looking at giving back some of that space now to reduce our big rent costs and be smart and strategic and utilize the building that we own in Bayshore. So those are some of the things that we're doing to, building up infrastructure-wise, board development, and also being realistic in this environment that we're in to make sure that we can continue to provide our critical mission, full stop.
So I'm going to throw this out to anybody who wants to answer this question, and maybe nobody will want to answer this question, but whatever. So when we went through COVID, COVID kind of forced a lot of nonprofits to be reactive, right? I mean, regulations were changing on a daily basis. Nobody knew what was going on. And as we've emerged, a lot of organizations kind of went into some of this like crisis management mode where, they're just trying to get through day to day. And David and a couple of you mentioned that, now you're starting to once again start thinking about strategic and being more proactive in your approach to things. So from a question perspective, what are you guys doing to try to be more proactive in the process now as a nonprofit organization, kind of leading the organization forward as opposed to kind of being, kind of more reactive and kind of forced to react to what's going on? Anybody want to talk about what you guys are doing proactively?
Well, I guess I'll jump in, but hopefully someone else might know as well. But I was just going to say, and thank you, David. We as you can hear, we are very grateful for our partnership with LGBT Network, and it's been really important all years, especially this year. I think that all of us are standing strong together. One thing that is interesting as far as a museum is concerned is we're kind of always planning forward. So sometimes I think folks are surprised to hear that we plan our exhibition calendars 3 to 4 years ahead. So right now, we already know what exhibitions will be in the museum in 2030. And that was the case in 2022, when I first joined as the executive director. One of the first things the staff and I did was work to create a 3-year exhibition calendar. So the show that David talked about, in fact, our entire year this year focused on LGBTQ artists, that was scheduled and planned back in 2022. I think, one of the things that we have to remember is, as an organization, you can be as proactive as possible. So, for example, in 2022, we were scheduling that 2025 would be a year celebrating and focused on the LGBTQ artists in our collection. And we did not have the ability to predict what might become a very different national climate for civil rights in our country. So that was something we were being proactive in planning ahead. But then there are some unknowns, right? There's unknowns and there's knowns. But I think what's important is as David mentioned, staying the course, remembering where your North Star is and your values. And so I think that helps all of our organizations as we plan forward. And I think that we saw that during the pandemic as well. And, I'll just say that, so this past Saturday, related to the shows that are up this summer, we just had a big community marriage ceremony at the museum on the steps. And the reason we did that, we partnered with the town clerk, so spirit of nonpartisan. I mean, obviously the museum's not partisan, but I mean, our town clerk is a registered Republican, so this is not about partisanship, but this is about people and love and civil liberties. And we felt it was really important to honor the 10th anniversary of the Obagrafel v. Hodges Supreme Court case that made marriage legal, for people to marry beyond gender, because what we've seen is that rights can be taken away. And so, even as an arts organization, it's our role to be part of the social fabric of our community. And it was really beautiful seeing all the couples there on Saturday, both couples who were getting married for the first, getting married. And then there were a number of couples renewing vows, and it was really beautiful.
Linda, I'll play the role of Ken.
I have to say, for planning for going forward, I agree with everything that Heather and David said. From my fund, it's a little different because we were promised, like you, David, we were given grants. We were given government grants, state and federal grants. And being a novice at this, which I am, thinking that, okay, they give you a grant and you celebrate and it's great and everybody's rah, rah, but then you wait and it's like 2.5 years later and I'm still waiting for the grant. And so the Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund, prides itself on the money that comes in. We give out that year to camperships to send the kids to camp. And then basically starting October after camp is over, we start from scratch. I learned a harsh lesson. Again, being a novice, I learned a very harsh lesson. So I had to learn going forward, as I did with my board, that every year we started the first year, we sent 54 kids to camp. And then we added to that 54, and the next year 165. I'm not bragging, I'm giving you statistics, okay? And then we had the pandemic and we did virtual camp, where we gave a $25,000 grant to one of the camps. It was very cool. We did a virtual camp. But then after that, we sent 212, okay, and then added to it's the same kids that go the next year, and we add to it. And it went all the way up to 266 kids. I was thrilled. Amazing. And then all of a sudden this year, where's my grant money? What happened to it? It's dangling. It's still dangling. And we did all the paperwork. It's all in, and we're just waiting. So I had to learn that it's okay if you can't send 266 kids to camp, okay, again, but you can send some of them to camp and also enhance the camp experience with in-kind things, which that's so much easier to get in kind than it is to get money. But it was really a harsh lesson. So going forward, we depend on donors and supporters and so on and so forth, like you. But I had to learn that, what do they say? We plan and the person up above laughs, you know what I mean? But I had to learn that I cannot plan on sending that amount of kids to camp unless something happens with getting our grants, and people, I don't know what else to tell you. So I'm very excited about going forward, but not excited about the fact that it's very difficult to get the money that's promised to us.
Yeah, I mean, and if we think about it, we are, as a nonprofit industry, we're the largest employer in the state. I mean, really, in pretty much every state, right? And so if we all most of us do advocacy within, our own organizations and our missions, imagine if we did that for our industry. And I always said 32 years, maybe I'll talk about succession planning later, but, that one of the last things I'd like to do is to see some legislation passed that if the government doesn't pay us on time, then they pay us interest. Not that we pay interest or try and figure out how the hell we're going to make payroll and pay our rent or pay our vendors. Because we're doing life's work that the government can't do or couldn't do at the cheaper costs that we're doing it. So
that's because their fringe factor is about 63% versus yours, which is about 25%. So,
yeah. So, if there's any elected officials in the webinar or
we'll send it to them.
Staff of members, let's talk about some legislation to pay nonprofits on time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about that. It just doesn't seem to ever gain any traction, and there's no recourse. So,
yeah, well, because we rely on them. So, we rely on them, and we die by them.
Sorry that I got kicked out for a while there, so I apologize for that. But thank you for keeping the conversation moving. Continuing to kind of pick on topics, let's talk a little bit about collaboration. I know that's something that Heather and David, you guys talked about in terms of the collaboration the two of you guys have. And I think in the nonprofit sector today, collaboration is totally vital. So maybe we can talk a little bit about why collaboration is important to your mission and to the sector overall, and maybe a little bit about what are your goals for partnerships and shared services in the next year. Joanna, do you want to kind of talk about that?
Sure. I think, I come into this as the executive director, but also I'm a mental health counselor. So all of us do this work because we want to help. And I think it's very humbling to have that moment where we know we can't do everything. Otherwise we're not serving our true mission. So partnerships and collaborations are key. I'm sitting on this meeting right now thinking, all right, we've worked with Stony Brook and, how can we kind of partner with whoever's on this meeting to best serve our clients? Because those in-kind services and those partnerships are what really help us gain community awareness, spread what our mission is so other agencies know it, but also the sharing of resources. I might know something that maybe another not-for-profit isn't aware of in terms of grant funding or in-kind resources. And I'm more than happy to share that because then there's a give and take back at that. For us at SibsPlace, I think our biggest struggle right now, where I'm looking to really further our collaborations, is with Spanish-speaking organizations. There's a real service gap in being able to provide bereavement services to Spanish-speaking children. I currently don't have a staff member that can do that. So my mission for this year is to really look for agencies, and we have a few that we refer out to often, but can we work together to maybe offer the services as a joint project? Because we have the expertise, they have the language, and we both have the clientele. And I think that's definitely a mission for us moving forward into 2026.
Great. Carolyn, you want to add to that?
Sure. As I'm sitting here listening to everybody, I had the exact same thought as Joanna did, is I could collaborate with each one of you on different things. And I think making those connections are so important. For me, as long as I've been in this role, I have found that collaborations with other organizations really has been not only just the key to our survival, but into moving our mission forward. So, as a children's hospital, we collaborate with all sorts of organizations, spanning from organizations like the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation and the CF Foundation, who will support our patients and bring, new opportunities for us to provide better services. We can provide the medicine, but it's some of the other things that go along with the medicine that are harder to fund, harder to provide, and harder to get access to. So I think some of our collaborations with some of these organizations has made a huge difference. We also have partnerships with Ronald McDonald House Charities, who provides a family room for our patients, and they're building a house on our property. We are recently, one of our newer collaborations, and I think this one's one that we're still trying to figure out and get up and running, is to work with the school districts. And what we really want to do is to get into the school districts. They struggle as much as all of us, on this call, with trying to provide the best services they can for their students. So we're trying to partner with them to give them better access to mental health, to, physicians when they need it, and really work together to provide better care for our kids. So I think, without those collaborations, it makes it very, very difficult to do, more than just the medicine. And it's really been important for us.
Anybody else want to jump in here?
I do.
Yeah,
Without,
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Jennifer, you first.
I was going to say, we rely on partnerships really just to provide our services. As I said, we work in schools, in partnership with schools, in partnership with community organizations and senior centers, et cetera. But also from an expertise, right? Right now, there's an older population. The older population is growing on Long Island. It's growing all over the country. And we want to serve those folks, but we are not experts, right? Let's say in Alzheimer's and dementia or Parkinson's or what have you, but we partner with the Tillis Center, with Long Island Museum, who does an annual conference, et cetera, and ARDC, et cetera, to with their expertise so that we can better serve those populations, right? So just partnering, and I mean, I've always wondered why we didn't partner more, just sharing kind of back office resources and things like that too, right? To make everybody's lives easier. I think if we could all share marketing resources, that would be great. But from an expertise perspective, so that we can focus, in our lane and bring what we do best to the table in partnership with other folks who have that other expertise and those other connections and resources. It just makes so much sense for everybody to partner.
Yeah, and again, I think, and Linda, we'll get to in a second, but I think it's a growing trend that's out there. It's been around for a while, but I think more and more we're hearing that, organizations understand that they can't do this by themselves, and if they're going to provide a solution to a community, they need to bring together all of the partners to really solve the issues that our communities are grappling with. So it becomes more of a kind of a holistic approach to dealing with issues. Linda?
Without collaboration, we wouldn't be here today. All of us wouldn't be here. But I have to tell you that for the nonprofit sector, I have never, ever called on anyone in the nonprofit sector who has not been willing to help with something that I need or something that we want, or collaborate or share whatever they have with us. And I think it's really important that we keep in mind that the new nonprofits that are starting up, the little brand new nonprofits that are starting up, they need our help. I'll give you an example. EJ's PJs, her name is Patricia. Somebody introduced me to her. She's really a very little small nonprofit, and we've, partnered up, collaborated with each other. And I see her grow as well as others. It's the same with mine, with the Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund. I grew because of Ken, and I'm not apple polishing, but you were a big part of that, because when we went to the Imagine Awards, okay, it's literally an event, okay, it's a happening, and that's how I got my name out there. I would say 90% of the people at the Imagine Awards had no idea who we were, and then all of a sudden, we walked out and look how many people knew who we were, or my not knowing who all of the people on this, Zoom right now. It's really important, and that's what keeps us going. So I think collaborating is one of the top things that there are for nonprofits.
Great. Anybody else?
Just as a sort of like interesting twist, I agree with what everyone said. Collaboration is real important. I mentioned that we're undergoing our strategic planning process, and so I think there were like 100 or somewhere up to 150 stakeholder interviews that were done by the consultant that's doing this. And one of the things that came back was, is the organization collaborating enough? Like, we don't know. And then, of course, we're like, of course we are. Like, we have a list of, 150, 200 organizations, schools, et cetera, that and more that we collaborate with. And what we found out is we're really not communicating that. Like, people don't care as much about like our e-newsletters. We have these programs that are happening and stuff like that, and they want to see different things. So, while collaboration is, extremely important to us, it was just interesting to hear that stakeholder feedback, that it's just as important to the community we serve. So
let's kind of change gears a little, and let's talk about maybe some of the trends that we're kind of seeing as we move forward through the rest of 2025 and into 2026. What do you see as some of the trends and challenges facing the nonprofit sector, and what are you guys doing in order to maybe take advantage of some of the emerging opportunities, if there are any opportunities? So, Jennifer, you want to start there?
Sure. So a lot of trends and challenges, right? I mean, everyone's talked about government funding concerns. I don't know how much more we need to think about, dwell on that. I think David brings up a good point, which is speaking to donors and constituents and what platforms are they on? We hear so much about social media, but who's really there? You know, what's the ROI there versus an e-newsletter? Sharing stories, sharing photographs. I think we always get the most engagement when we share photographs. I think another huge trend and challenge is that transparency and credibility. You know, there hasn't always been a fair or a positive portrayal of nonprofits in the media. And so we're fighting that a little bit. Obviously, competition just from the number of other nonprofits and you know, folks can't support everybody, unfortunately. I did talk about that growing number of older adults, which brings some great opportunities to get new volunteers and board members and possibly donors, but also we might be losing knowledge, you know, getting harder to find staff, and social disconnection. I think the biggest one that's going to put the most strain on all our resources and really challenge us to be innovative is it's just social disconnection.
Okay. Heather, you want to kind of dive in here?
Sure. You know, I don't want to, you know, like go back too much to the federal stuff, except what I will say just differently about separate from funding is, you know, in the museum sector right now, if people are looking in the news, you know, some of what you're seeing is, I think sadly I think what we see out externally as a trend and therefore as a challenge is around fear, you know, and censorship, that is newer to our field, or, you know, well, newer here lately, you know, and so I think in some ways the response trend, I guess, that we have to tap into is courage. You know, it's very interesting for us at the museum because next year, 2026, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the creation of the painting Eclipse of the Sun. That painting is by George Gross, and it's in the permanent collection at the museum. It's actually really our singular master. We have a lot of masterworks at the museum, but it really is the piece that we are known for that is incredibly important, a world masterpiece by George Gross. George Gross painted that painting in 1926 in Germany. And he was identified by the Nazis as a degenerate artist. And the painting and several of his other artworks were censored. He was put on trial. And he fled Germany to come to New York for artistic freedom. And he brought that painting with him. And he ended up living here in Huntington, and is quite special to all of us here on Long Island. And through a long story, which I won't share right now, but is quite beautiful, that painting eventually came to be part of the collection at the Heckscher Museum. I share that because it's so striking to me that we're about to celebrate the 100th anniversary of that painting and of George Gross being, you know, labeled this degenerate artist in this moment in Germany where art was being censored. And there was this, like, the Nazis actually put on their, what they called you know, they had labeled like a good museum, a good art show. And then there was the degenerate art that was not to be shown. And, yeah, we're at this very strange moment again, 100 years later, where another artist that we are involved with, Patricia Cronin, who has a chapter in a catalog with our next exhibition, and who's a sculptor. Her work was just labeled just that, degenerate art, basically, in the Smithsonian by the President of the United States as part of because it is part of the Smithsonian's collection, and it's been put on this list. And so I think that is a concerning trend. And again, this is not about partisanship. It's just about, like, I don't think I ever thought I'd be living in a country that was about to celebrate its 600th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, as we are also seeing this censorship around art and artistic freedom. And one of the things that as an art museum we try to be is a safe space for artistic expression and for community building. And so that is a opportunity and a challenge for us right now, right? To remain, again, I say nonpartisan because I think it's important for it to be clear that, like, in speaking about protecting artistic freedom, I'm not trying to be political. Right? I'm just trying to talk about art and people and creativity and free expression, like these values that are in our Declaration of Independence. And I think this trend around fear and censorship and concern for us in the nonprofit sector, where we're so focused usually on serving the community and supporting people and amplifying marginalized voices, and that art and a museum should be spaces where people can come and see things, and maybe they don't agree with everything they see, but it makes them think about things. And I think that is this moment we're in, this moment where there's this trend, and we have to come up against it, not in a aggressive fashion, but more just have the courage to protect freedom of expression.
If I could add to that, thank you, Heather, for that. And it's right. It's not about partisanship, in my opinion. In starting this organization 32 years ago, both Nassau and Suffolk County were run by Republican administrations, and just as they are now, and legislatures. And there have been many people, and I say this because people tend to think that only for socially progressive, whatever that means, causes are only supported by Democrats. And that could be argued, certainly. And so, so we've had plenty of folks who have supported the work that we do, the impact of our work, here locally. And sometimes on a statewide level. Federally is a different situation. And what's happening now with the federal government, a lot of people here in New York say, hey, we live in New York, we're fine. We're not. We see the trend happening here with the work that we do in the schools in particular. Not as many schools are inviting us in to do our signature anti-bullying program. They're afraid to talk about it. They certainly are staying away from talking about anything trans. Gay straight alliance clubs, which we have a study that we collected data on last year, and it shows the impact of it, of how it saves lives, of how kids are going to class, of how they're performing better in school, how their mental health is stronger, are being taken away because of fear, of retribution. And so I think we need to be real also that what's happening on the federal level is happening here on Long Island, in a major way. And also, it could be potentially the fear of what we see happening, in the federal government, where they seek retribution on people that stand up to them. And we have missions that we need to serve and not, in my opinion, not run away from, right? And we need to kind of double down on. But it's about how we do it now too. So while we fight the good fight and what needs to be done, we're now working with schools and educators and advisors to say, okay, you feel like you can't have the GSA in your school. What can we do? And so we're now securing local libraries to make sure that these clubs go forward. And so we're adapting right now to some of the strategies we used when we first started many years ago to make sure that these impactful programs and services that save lives and it saves the kids' lives. It also helps the parents as well. The parents of these kids, continue, while at the same time not shying away from, what's happening on the federal level. And that is it's a disturbing trend that's happening that, that our organization is planning for, to make sure that the things that we do that help to create those and that help to create the safety for the kids and the parents and the families wherever we can continue in different ways. We'd love for it to happen in the schools, and it still is happening to a degree, but there's a lot of fear amongst the educators and administrators too. Not that they don't want to do the right thing, they're worried about what the community is going to say.
But it's not even just the community; it's the dollars too, right? I mean, they're afraid of losing funding. They're afraid of, policy changes. They're afraid of all of this stuff. So it's not just, community, which there is a community bias that comes into play, but there's the other pieces too, in terms of, the lifeblood of the sector.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is, something I think as an industry that, collectively, particularly with those organizations that work with marginalized communities, and it's not just the LGBTQ community, immigrant communities, people of color, Latino, you name it, people with all abilities, mental health, that we need to, figure out how we stand together strong while ensuring the best way that we can, that what we're doing continues maybe in different ways, but that, like we're doing with libraries and other places, just to make sure that that this happens. And we're bringing back an old program that we did years ago, which we'll probably rename it. It was called LIGSE, Long Island Gay Straight Educators Association, which brought educators together as to organize and as a community. And that's coming back this year too, because that fear that educators are having right now in our schools is very real, and it's having an impact.
I think that's sort of true. I don't know why I'm echoing. I think that's sort of true everywhere. I think we live in very unprecedented times right now. And, the trend that we're seeing in healthcare is profound distrust of the healthcare system and our ability to practice medicine the way we've always practiced is changing. The culture itself, there's a demand for medicine. You can get on Amazon and get a doctor if you want right now, so we're trying to adapt by providing more telehealth services, having access to good healthcare for kids. But it's also promoting the things that we know that will save lives, same as immunizations, our ability to provide care to the transgender kids. There's a lot on the table right now, and, we're working, just like all of you, to be able to work within the system, because there is that fear of losing the federal funding if you continue to do it. And, we'll have to see where it goes, but we're working very hard to still provide information to our families, what we know to be the right thing to do, and, do it the best we can in the current environment.
I do a lot of speaking on common sense gun safety, and it's really important. I like to go into the schools to speak. And a lot of that has been canceled for fear. The administration has called and said, we're going to put it off, or we're going to wait, or I know that this has been, scheduled, but we need to reschedule. And just a little bit of a story. Every year we send from exit 48 with a park and ride, we send 60 children from family service leave. We send them to camp from there. And it's a big deal. We have the reporters come and some government officials come, but a lot of parents come. We make a big deal and the kids are all excited about it. And this would have been the 6th year where there was, it's like a big celebration before they go off to camp. And I was called by the camp director, who's a very good friend. And he said, Linda, I have some great news. We're still going to pick up the 60 children. He said, but we can't have anyone there but you. And I said, why? And he said, because of ICE. We're fearful. Nobody can be there except you to see them off. I mean, it's really impacting all of us. I don't have the solution, as nobody here does, but the fear is so there to not be able to go into a school. And I'm not just talking about high schools, even to talk to the elementary schools about common sense gun safety for fear of losing whatever it is, for fear of losing funding. It's not right. I don't know the answer, but it's really not right.
And I also just add, and I think what punctuates all of this is we already knew going into this year that mental health needs of children and teens was on the rise, right? We've got kids that have been increasingly needing more and more support mental health wise. And I see that firsthand. I'm here 20 plus years. I've been giving out referrals more and more in the last 2 years than I have in all of my years for more individualized care. So I think it kind of goes back to our prior question about collaboration and making sure that we're able to find the supports where we need to for our families, but always remembering that, we're afraid, the parents are afraid, but the kid trickles down to the kids. They're afraid too. And how are we meeting their mental health needs? And I think that is where, where we're looking at funding and collaborations, is trying to find ways to make sure that we're supporting them so that we are providing that prevention for them. We're providing that safety net, that sense of community before they make that, misstep.
Gary threw a question in the chat, which I'm just going to read out if anybody wants to jump in. It's great to hear Linda speaking of measurement, David speak of strategic planning, and Heather speak of 3-year planning of exhibits. My question, are the organizations here today doing multi-year scenario planning, aligning resources, developing metrics, and prioritizing their programs so to remain going concerns? What have they learned, and what hard decisions have they had to make? Anybody want to jump in on that one? I know it's a mouthful.
We can plan. We do the best that we can all do planning. Okay, planning is great, but then again, it's the environment that we're in that allows us to go forward with what we've planned. For me, it's more like a day-to-day sometimes, as opposed to planning for the next year. I certainly have my plans for next year, and I hope that that they come to fruition, but we never know. But that's life, and now it's even harder I find it's really harder for the nonprofit.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that you do your planning, but you got to remain dynamic.
Totally. You said it much better than I did.
You got to be in a situation where, you make plans, but those are going to change, and they're going to change. But again, I think one of the other things that Gary mentioned is, the whole aspect of kind of scenario planning and having multiple scenarios so that, you're in a situation, you plan, but what happens if that funding doesn't come through? What are the steps you're going to take as an organization? I mean, I think more so now than ever before, you kind of have to be proactive in that budgeting process and proactive in that planning process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that, we're certainly taking a look at, and not only as part of the strategic planning process, but, we have one federal grant. That's all we have. But it's a decent sized one, even if it wasn't, whatever. It helps to provide critical services. It employs people. It provides jobs. And it's from the CDC, which has been, decimated, may not even be around anymore. We're shocked we still have this grant, actually, because it serves trans people and trans people of color in particular. And so, and on that grant, it employs 4 full-time staff. And so we're just waiting for that to be yanked at any time. We've been waiting since January. We're not just waiting, we're anticipating that it is going to be, taken away at some point. And we were trying to figure out not only how we can keep these services going. I mean, that's one of the things we're doing. Throughout our whole history, we've provided services even if they weren't funded. I don't think we can do that anymore, for those particular type of services, as much as I'd want to, or we'd want to, but we're trying to figure out now, how do we keep these incredible people who are on our staff and part of our team employed? And so I think we finally have it figured. Finally, it's only been 9 months, but I think we have it figured out now of how we can do it. But that's one of the examples of sort of planning for scenarios in this climate of things that are going to happen probably at any any given moment, because of the way that things are happening. And of course, one of the scenarios was like, hey, we may not be able to employ these people anymore, but we care deeply about them. They care deeply about, the community and the work that they do. They're incredible. And so it's tough. But, thank God we've been given, I don't know why I'm thanking that, we still have this grant that's number one in the nation in this federal grant in terms of helping to find the most, the largest number of people that are testing positive and get them into treatment. But, but thankfully, we're able to, figure something out that will keep these people employed.
That kind of feeds into, I guess, the next question. So you're in a situation where, again, you're budgeting for the best, but being realistic in terms of your approach to how you need to run your organization, which means that, if funding does go away, what are you doing to diversify your revenue streams? What are you doing to, bring on other sources of revenue into the organization that maybe wasn't there before? Carolyn, do you want to kind of talk about what you guys are doing?
Sure. I most people think of healthcare as, you see a patient, you submit a bill, that's where you make your money. But it doesn't really work that way for children's hospitals, especially our hospital, which is part of the state system. So we're the catchnet hospital for Suffolk County. We see everyone. If you have insurance, you don't have insurance, you're underinsured, we take them all. We do rely on federal funding to support that. And as everyone has stated, we're all worried about continuing to get our federal funding. And if you do get it, how much you're going to get. So we've had to really look critically at other ways to support our programs. In addition to patient care, we rely on federal grants to do our research, which are also getting harder and harder to get. So, we've looked at a lot of different ways that we can sort of help supplement some of that income. Insurance companies will pay for performance. So they look at our quality metrics and our quality dashboard. And if we can show that we are providing, a certain level of care for our patients, they will give us back some money. So we've sort of looked into those revenue streams. But I think, also looking at supporting our research and our educational goals, we've looked for outside sources of funding. And that includes some industry grants, some grants from other organizations that will supply us with some funding. And, at this point, we are relying heavily on philanthropic dollars. So, we are very appreciative to all of our donors and the people who help us get by every day. And without them, we wouldn't, even in the good times, we wouldn't, be able to get to where we are today.
David, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said some of the stuff that we're looking on. We're definitely putting more of an emphasis on the ratio of government versus other funding right now, and we're making some strides on that. Part of that was building our board, and that is going in an extremely positive way that is helping to raise the additional money. The board fully understands the reliance on government funding is not going to, and not only the reliance on it, but being able to actually get paid from it, is something that is just going to keep us in a vicious cycle that will always, keep us stressed. We just hired someone. They started someone focused in on individual giving, and starting. I said we weren't going to start anything new, but we did get a donation for it, for an advocacy initiative that. Where we're training nonpartisan, training folks to run for local school boards and library boards, as we have had to fight, the removal of LGBTQ information, symbols, displays over the last couple of years in some school districts and libraries, particularly Smithtown and Connecticut as the two biggest ones. So so we're and that's helping a lot more with community engagement. Also, meeting people where they're at and letting folks know that the only way we can do this is with your support. And we plan to run 2 cohorts a year for that. And we say that each cohort requires $35,000. And so far we're almost at the goal of raising the money for the second cohort right now. And that will, and so really focusing in on, raising more money privately, I think is really where we need to go.
They're talking about the fact that over the next 20 years, we're going to see the largest level of wealth transference we've ever seen in this country, with somewhere around 11 to 12 trillion dollars finding its way to nonprofit sectors, or to the nonprofit sector and nonprofit organizations. Have any of you guys taken any initiatives to start to try to attract some of those dollars? And if so, what are those? Heather, I see you shaking your head, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think planned giving is something that a lot of us think about, and especially, you mentioned the wealth transfer, but it's also that some of our, strongest, most committed donors, board members, people who've been involved with our organizations for decades and decades and decades, it's important to be engaging in conversations about legacy. One of the things to your earlier the question just before around diversifying revenue, or as we think about forward planning, certainly, several, the museum as well as some other organizations have endowments. Our endowment at the Heckscher Museum is very small compared to most other museums. We'll take 5% or what have you, a draw each year to help support operating, but 5% of, $3 million or, $2 million is not the same as $30 billion, that the Met has. So, one thing that we certainly are looking to do is to build up the endowment, so that small percentage that we can take each year to support operating, that percentage would be greater if the principal were greater, right? And talking to folks about that have been supporting the museum for, as I mentioned, for decades and decades and decades, about how they want to make sure that their legacy is part of sustaining the museum into the future, and I think these conversations are important. They're also hard, none of us, nobody likes to think about mortality, so they can be, really hard conversations. But I think also what can be hard is thinking about an organization that you care about. Maybe you were involved in founding, or you're involved in really helping get off the ground, and then you've been involved in it and supporting for, every year for 35 years. And, I think trying to talk to donors about how it could also be hard to think about that organization going away, or just that organization not receiving support from you, in the future when you've supported them for so long. So, plan giving, I think, is really important. Endowment building, of course, these are opportunities for all of us. They just, take time and thoughtful conversation, and it would be, I think, an opportunity, which I haven't seen happen as much as it would be great to see, is, folks who are in the private sector who are in positions of financial advisement, or, who are actually sort of trusted financial advisors to folks who are thinking about planning, wealth planning and legacy building. It would be helpful, I think, if more nonprofits, if we could have more transparent connection and relationships with those advisors, because those advisors really know, it's their clients, they're having those conversations, they're talking with them about what matters most to them. And those are deep, important conversations. Those financial advisors are trusted. But they don't always know all the organizations that are around. And it would be great if there were more ways for the financial advisors to connect to the nonprofit sector, so that information could get to those clients through their investment advisors, as well as directly through the organization.
Heather, I'm going to tell you, nobody has said that better than you. For real. No, for real. Because again, I've only been around for 7.5 years. Okay. And, it's funny, you have wishes, like you go to sleep at night and you have a wish. And I wish there was someone out there who saw, I'm going to be really transparent. So I wish there was someone out there who saw what we did, took it to heart and wanted to be the face, the funder, the special person to take on the Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund and watch it fly, because I have a board and they're wonderful, but it's just me. You know what I mean? It's just me. And it really does. It takes your life. It really it's a full-time job besides your regular job, but I have never heard anybody say it better than you. So in front of it, I thank you, because to have someone to understand what the fund does, and I haven't been around for 35 years, but to know what the fund does and to really care and to say, you know what, I would really like to be part of this fund. It's like a wish. It's just a wish.
But there's clearly, right, and we know there are people out there who care very deeply. They've also been touched by gun violence, or they know somebody else who has been, and it's like there's this disconnect, right, between organizations like yourself, and then there's this person out there, or people who really care very deeply about your issue, and they have, as Ken said, they have built this wealth over their lifetime, and they're thinking about what to do with that. And they could make a transformative gift to an organization like yours that's deeply connected to something that they're very committed to, but they might not even know about your organization. And so, being able to figure out how to connect those dots, I think would be huge for the sector.
Thank you. Really, thank you.
Part of the issue is, we talk about, the individuals, the silent generation of the baby boomers who have those dollars, who are going to be kind of passing them on to the next generation. So when you talk about strategy and you talk about, the need to reach out to these individuals, there's also the need to kind of communicate with their families so that you keep the family connected. Also important to bring on the next generation of volunteers, donors, everything else into your organizations, the one who's going to be inheriting that money, who, maybe their parents didn't have, or their grandparents didn't have that connection to your organization, but they do. So it's got to be kind of a two-pronged approach, is how do we approach the individuals who have the resources, but then also how do we approach those families and get them connected to our organization too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Ken, you brought up volunteers, who are just as important, I think, as donors, to really keeping the organization running and going and helping with events.
Well, people who volunteer for an organization are 40% more likely to donate to the organization too. So the volunteers are important because they provide the resources that maybe the organization can't afford to pay for, but then they also provide potentially dollar resources once they get connected to the organization. So. Staying in line with fundraising and everything else, one of the key issues is, how do you obtain donors? And then once you get those donors, how do you keep them as in the fold with your organization? Less than 50% of all donors who give money to an organization give money a second time. So what have you guys been doing in order to kind of increase donor engagement, create consistency in gifting and everything else? Joanna, you want to start with that one?
I think a lot of it comes from it's hard work, but it's maintaining those personal connections. I think, we send a newsletter, we send social media updates, and that's all important and good. But if you don't maintain those personal connections, whether it's through a handwritten card, we oftentimes have the kids sign a card, especially if there's like a big donor or an in-kind donor that we want to be appreciative of. But it's maintaining those personal connections. And like you, Linda, like I'm pretty much a one-woman show in terms of fundraising. And also delivering services. So it's a lot. It does take a lot of our time, and maybe it's bringing in consultants to help you with that. But the donor wants to hear the story, and I invite them to events as much as I can so that they could see their money in action. They could see the kids enjoying a barbecue or enjoying the prom that they're helping to fund, so that they can, in fact, see that their money is truly going to making a difference in the lives of these children. That's our strategy.
Are you doing anything with respect to videos to kind of tell that story through videos?
A little. Again, there's definitely things we can improve upon, but I think, yeah, video storytelling and through the pictures is definitely a way to convey our messaging.
Sorry,
Joanna, we learned, I'm sorry, Ken,
Go ahead.
that we learned that we have to have, for our donors and our supporters, there has to be something for everyone. So what we've done is we have a gala that everybody goes to. Then we had like a bar, it's called Bark for Beigel, where it was very low keyed, and the old supporters, the new supporters, anybody who had a dog who wanted to, bring their dog for the day, they came out, and it was just something for everyone, and they got to bring their dog. And then we have a golf class for the golfing people. And then we have a run for the runners. It's a lot, but that's the only way that we keep them engaged, aside from a million thank you notes, and like you say, emails and texts, and then putting out photos of where they were at what event, putting that up. That's how we keep them engaged. I mean, because social media, it can be your friend and it can be your enemy. But we the way we have to do it is we have something for everyone, and we hope that they came back year after year.
Right. And I agree with that too. And I think I also wrestle with, you brought up the videos, pictures, you also don't want to be exploiting the families you're serving too. So, I'm always mindful of, you're putting out material with families that are grateful and they want to share their stories. So that's important to find them. But, you also want to be able to maintain their sense of privacy. So that's always a struggle with me, when we're putting out anything that has to do with the kids that we're serving and the families that we're serving. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Linda, the more you can connect your donors to what you're doing and show the impact that they're having with their dollars, the better off you are. Heather, you look like you were going to say something before.
I'm just nodding in agreement with my colleagues, because I think it is that we each try so many strategies. I'm hearing Joanna, the handwritten notes and inviting, and Linda, inviting them to events, and I think it sort of becomes the all of the above. Phone calls, handwritten notes, e-newsletters, inviting people to attend events. I think sometimes maybe as an arts organization, you could think, oh, well, we have an advantage because we can invite our members and donors to museum openings and events and things like that. But it still, comes down to those personal touches. I think, the one thing I was just thinking about is there's also this, there's donor retention, which is incredibly important, obviously. I think there's also a reality around sometimes organizations will lose donors as people's values shift. And we're seeing that in this climate moment. And sometimes I think that it's important to be able to know when that if that happens, and sometimes it does. Where donors' priorities have shifted. Maybe they were, you were a health organization, and that issue was very prescient in their lives, and then they got better, or the person in their lives got better, and then it becomes less relevant to them. And the same thing can happen in the arts. I mentioned, we are focusing on, this year's focus was absolutely on LGBTQ artists in our collection. The museum in general has been really trying to shine a light on marginalized artists who hadn't had the light shown on them before at the museum. We, as you heard, we are very committed to free admission, being bilingual, opening the doors wide open at the museum. These are things that I hope are attracting many new donors who care about those issues. But the reality is sometimes there are some folks who, they had a different concept of the museum. And it might not be the same as it was, 30 years ago when they got involved. And we can just try to be kind and close and give people personal information. But I think there's also times where we have to understand that where an organization is and where a donor is might not be aligned anymore. Those can be hard moments, but I think it's a sort of a reality too. We have to acknowledge.
Carolyn?
One of the things that we did, I mean, we do all of the same stuff too. And I have to say I am fortunate because I actually have a team of people that helps me do all of these things. But I do try to maintain the connections myself because I think it's important for the donors not to just work with our advancement team, but to hear it from me and from the other people that I work with, what we're doing with their money. But we also started an advancement, Stony Brook Children's Advancement Council, where we've invited our larger donors. It's an invite only sort of a thing. And our larger donors get invited to sit on the Advancement Council. And we don't solicit money from them at our meetings. We really just present to them some of the great things that we're doing so that it kind of keeps them updated, it keeps them engaged. And even if they're done giving, it still gives them the opportunity to hear what we're doing and to sort of absorb it, maybe reconsider giving again, or to introduce us to other people who they know have an interest in X area of medicine or some program that we're doing. And, by having these people on this council, we've gotten some other donations through them. And it's a nice sort of almost time efficient way of keeping people engaged because you get a whole group of people together at the same time and you can share what you're doing. And that's worked really nicely. And we've had that for years now.
Right. When we talk to nonprofit organizations, when we ask them what are the greatest challenges, obviously fundraising and bringing in discretionary funds and having the money they need to meet their programming is kind of the number one priority or the number one issue. Second, I think is, staffing and leadership. And, one of the big issues that nonprofits grapple with today is, building that leadership pipeline to, ensure that the organization has ongoing continuity. What are you guys doing, or what's your approach to leadership development, and what are you doing to kind of create that leadership team or effective leadership team? Jennifer, you want to kind of jump in on that one?
Sure. So we are actually going through a transition in leadership right now, right? I was operations director, now I'm co-executive director. And this is something that we were talking about for 3 years of planning. We knew that our founding executive director, shout out to Nancy Duncan for holding down the fort for so long. We knew she wanted to retire, finally have a personal life. So she's been working with myself and Jessica Hines, who's our artistic and education director. And we brought on a third person and we were open to all ideas, right? What should the leadership look like? What should the organization look like? And through all the discussions with the staff, with the board, with everybody, just planning, always keeping in mind that the most important thing is that our programs continue, right? That we continue to serve Long Island with these programs, grow the program, be innovative, be flexible, etc. And so by working together with the existing team and bringing somebody back into the team, making sure everybody was in their strengths, and that we're sharing the leadership. We were able to, and we're still in the midst of it. We did a name change, like I said, new leadership, et cetera, but we're still in the midst of it. But the knowledge and the skills are transferring, and everybody's been on board. The old board members, the new board members, like I said, the staff. And then within the staff, in terms of keeping the skills that we need, to go run our programs, we have a very set course of how to grow. We do trainings throughout the year. We'll always do a spring check-in. We always do a fall check-in and, skill tweak session, fall refresher, spring wrap up. And there's a very set course of if you want to become a mentor and you want to then become a liaison with the school and so forth. It's very set. I mean, we're lucky that with the Dancing Classrooms program, it's a proven program. It has, the leadership and the levels of skills built in for the particular program. So we're so lucky to be part of that network. But on both fronts, whether it's staff, leadership, board, it's just so important to really know, how to get the skills going. What are the paths? recognize everybody's strengths, keep them in their strengths, and then work on whatever weaknesses, right? One of our weaknesses as a team was networking. And so we brought on somebody who's really good and comfortable with it. And brought us, 4 new board members in the space of like a month. So, yeah, just keep working on the strengths, recognizing the weaknesses, and filling those gaps.
I think a lot of organizations want to know if they can borrow that staff member to help them bring on new board members too. So
Maybe. I want to be nice and say maybe, but we really need her right now.
Joanna, do you have anything to add on leadership?
No. I think we start from the ground up. We have this great relationship with a couple of the universities around and colleges around. So we take on interns, which again helps us in our ability to deliver services. But then we hire them. So now they have the training. They're with us for a year. I have all of my employees that do mental health services. There's 6 of us. I'm the only one that didn't start as an intern. So we've really been able to take these young minds or these new professionals, train them on our mission, train them on how we deliver our services, and then provide them with a career path. And I could look around the room with these 6 professionals and see how they might take, I don't think I'm going anywhere anytime soon. I have 2 kids in college. I'm not retiring any minute, but you could look at the room and see that you're building up these future leaders and you're helping them to have a stake in the mission. I really do believe that because we are a small staff, everyone's voice is heard. When we were looking to shift the mission or add programming or to expand something, I want to make sure that the rest of the team is involved in that and then are able to take leadership responsibilities as part of that expanded mission if that's something they're passionate about. So I think feeling that they're heard and respected and knowing that they are, part of moving this mission forward helps to build their leadership skills. And then, there's the trainings and all of that comes with being part of a hospital system that helps reinforce that. But, I think having that personal investment and knowing that they started with us, right at the beginning of their professional career and they have that willingness to grow and they've been with us, the retention rate is still there. So they're still with us, 5-10 years out.
I think one of the things you hear about in the nonprofit sector is that turnover in the nonprofit sector is greater than turnover in the for-profit world. And I think part of that is communication, in terms of communicating what upward potential and upward growth exists within the organization. What are you guys doing in terms of, allowing people or communicating with people as terms of, what their potential within the organization is? Does anybody want to? David?
Yeah, so this wasn't me, but I'll give kudos to our CEO who did this and created a leadership pipeline, or how folks can a trajectory to move up, and that's explained to folks when they get hired and then throughout. And we've had extremely low turnover the last couple of years. And each year we do a staff development day. It's not any kind of training. It's just coming together and having fun and doing games and team building. And at the end of that, we recognize people for their years of service to the organization. And it's amazing to see the actual longevity that we have had. I mean, aside from myself, which doesn't count really, I guess. But for founding the organization and being there 32 years, we have people who have been there 25, 18, 17, 16. A lot now who have been there 6, 7 years, and it really gives people a sense of growth within the organization. So someone could move from a program coordinator to a program manager to a program supervisor. So we've created that. I mean, we used to have titles that, I'm guilty of it, that we created that couldn't even fit on a business card, right? And so now it just simplified things for folks, help them understand that this is a place you can grow professionally and be promoted and create a work environment and work atmosphere that is supportive. And that came out in some of the strategic planning interviews when the person interviewed staff, that people were saying, this is the first job I've worked at where I really feel safe. I can be myself. I see a future here. And so, so that's, it was really being intentional of, creating a structure where people could see themselves growing from, an on the ground service level to a management supervisory type of position, all throughout the organization.
Anybody else want to talk about leadership and what they're doing or what they're doing to keep staff engaged? All right, so then let's dive into technology. Technology is changing the face of how nonprofits operate. AI is probably one of the fastest growing segments of technology. I'm curious to know what you guys are doing and how you've adapted any AI practices into what you guys are doing from an organizational perspective. Jennifer, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I'm big on technology, right? Technology makes our lives easier, makes our jobs easier. I still work in technology. When it comes to AI, we've only dipped our toes in, being perfectly honest. I mean, it's everywhere, but so I use it if I'm really stuck on marketing ideas, right? Like, hey, what's trending? Give me an idea just to get me started. But then it's got to be in my words, in our organization's words, right? It's got to feel like it's coming from us. It's got to be our words. We know our organizations way better than ChatGPT does. Little caveat for everybody out there using AI. It's just summarizing what it's finding. It's not checking the sources. It's not going to be in your words. It's not going to be warm necessarily. So if you're using it like that, it should just be a jumping off point, but you still have to do the research and check your facts. And then the other thing I'll say from an environmental perspective, AI processing takes up a lot of electricity. It takes a lot of water. It's not an environmentally friendly solution. So we need to be using it properly. That said, I think we should use it. So my next steps are really jumping into where does it make sense to use it? Where does it save us time in setting up our project or task list, or really automating something and not using it just for text. So that's next steps for me. So like I said, so far on the nonprofit side, just dipping the toes in, but now really thinking about how to use it properly.
Yeah, we've seen organizations put together committees from all walks of the organization looking at how they can use AI to support their staff in an effective way and to find ways to create efficiencies and handle maybe some of the lower functionality so that their staff could actually rise up and do more from a thought leadership role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially right in the arts sector. Heather's going to nod on this one. We're creatives. We don't necessarily want to do some of those operational tasks, right? So if AI can help there, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've seen it used in terms of, summarizing documents or understanding, and you can teach AI your voice. I mean, it's not a perfect voice, but you can teach AI your voice. We've done it where we've taken thousands of articles we've written, put it through AI and said, this is our voice. We want the next article to sound like ours.
It has saved us from the agony of atrocious writing to begin with. And then, of some of the writing stuff, but we're helping train people on AI. That it's all about recognizing your voice, what kind of prompts do you need to put in, and kind of diving into it, to connect what we know people have inside, to be able to produce things a lot better. So.
Okay, we're basically running out of time here, so I apologize, but in 30 seconds or less, I'm going to go around. If everybody can maybe just give one piece of advice that you'd offer to the nonprofits who are listening in. So Heather, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess I'll say to be resilient and to think about other uses of technology. So we at the museum are not really, I would say, using AI in the ways that others were just describing. It's probably the librarian, museum-y folks and parts of us that are very fact-driven. But we are using AR, right, augmented reality, to create virtual sculptures in our park. And we are using app technology to make the art and the museum more accessible to people of all different abilities. We've worked with Roberta Rosenberg on that. So I would just say to look to technology around accessibility and inclusion and how it can further your mission, not so much the AI part necessarily, but the other parts of technology innovation.
Awesome. Carolyn?
Well, my advice would be to kind of go back to, why it is you're doing what you're doing when you're doing this work. I think we talked a lot about the challenges today, which can be daunting, and a lot of work. And I think for me, I'm a pediatrician first. So when it starts to get a little bit overwhelming, I go see patients. And, when I see a kid get better and smile and go home with the services that they need, I remember why I am doing the work that I'm doing. And it kind of revitalizes me and recharges me. So don't ever forget why you're doing what you're doing. Go back to that because it will help.
Linda?
Probably I'm the littlest of all the organizations on here. So for me, it's a little different. For me, I would say for a smaller nonprofit, just make sure anybody who's on your board of directors or is all in with their heart as well, because you don't want, I would prefer not to have someone on the board of directors who just has a nonprofit, Scott J. Beigel Memorial Fund nonprofit on their resume, but somebody who is all in with their heart and really want to work hard to make the organization flourish. And that's really important. I'm learning that.
Great. Jennifer?
I would say have reasonable expectations, right? You can't do everything all at once. And find that happy medium between the goals and the vision and the day-to-day.
Joanna?
So I'm going to end with my mental health cap on and say it's about self-care and taking care of ourselves. I think we talked a lot about fear and uncertainty and kind of not being kind of sure of the climate. So if we as leaders are able to present a healthy, well-being environment, mental health positive environment for our staff, and we show that by example, by setting boundaries, by taking care of ourselves, taking our time off, making a lunch break, going for a walk, doing all the things that make us feel good so we could come to the table and have those good feelings and not that fear and uncertainty, that's going to trickle down to your staff and then also to your participants.
And finally, David?
Sure. And first, thank you, Ken, and the entire team at Serini and Associates for always just being out there to support the nonprofit community. I really don't know what all of us would do without you, and I mean that. So thank you for that. And I just want to expand, I guess, on yes, I agree with what everyone said, and expand on what Joanna said. And it's something that, as a leader for 32 years, I've just come to a realization that, as leaders of the organizations, sometimes we feel we have to uphold an image that could be very taxing. And in particular for myself, working not only within the Long Island community, but the LGBTQ community. And so that self-care is important. Remember to always be yourself, no matter what. And I think that self-care is something I forgot about for a long time, and it's something I'm focused on now. And I think it's real important.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to thank our amazing panelists for sharing your passion, your stories with us today, and thank everyone for joining us this morning. Before we close, I want to remind everybody that the applications for the 14th Annual Long Island Imagine Awards are now officially open. The deadline to apply is November 24th at midnight, and we can't wait to see the incredible submissions from across the nonprofit sector. You can apply at www.imagineawardsli.org. I'm also excited to share that we've added a new category this year, the Sustainability and Environmental Award, to recognize organizations that are making a lasting impact on both our communities and our planet. So if your organization is driving change, building impact, imagining a better future, make sure you apply. Who knows, next year you might be the ones on this stage inspiring us all. Thanks again for being here today, and let's keep imagining where possible together. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.